Good evening. My name is Markus Rathai. I'm professor of music history at the School of Music at Yale and the Institute of Sacred Music. And I want to welcome you to this year's Tangeman Lecture. The Tangeman Lecture is the annual lecture of the Institute of Sacred Music given by a distinguished musicologist or composer and often connected to a performance, like in this case, Joseph Haydn's Creation. The Tangeman Lecture is named after Robert S. Tangeman, the late professor of musicology at Union Theological Seminary and a scholar of sacred music. His late wife, Clementine Miller Tangeman, and her brother, Irvin Miller, were the founders of the Yale Institute of Sacred Music, and so this lecture was endowed in his name and to honor his memory. I'm particularly excited tonight to welcome my colleague, David Lang. David's music has been performed by major music, dance, and theater organizations throughout the world and in the most renowned concert halls and festivals in the United States and in Europe. He is well known as co-founder and co-artistic director of New York's legendary music festival Bang on a Can, and he's active composing for film and television. His music for Paolo Sorrentino's film Youth received an Academy Award and Golden Globe nomination, among many other honors. At the School of Music, David teaches a studio of graduate level composition students, and he also teaches a very popular course for performance majors, how to compose. And during the summers, Professor Lang is a faculty member at the New Music Workshop at the Norfolk Chamber Music Festival and the Yale Summer School of Music. He has won a Pulitzer Prize for his Little Match Girl Passion. And the reason why we invited him tonight is the upcoming performance of Joseph Haydn's Creation. Just as a reminder, we have two performances of this piece performed by the Yale Schola Cantorum and Juilliard 415, one in New York in Alice Tully Hall on May 1st, and the second one in New Haven in Woolsey Hall on May 2nd. Both the May 1st and the May 2nd performances are going to start at 7:30. So the reason we invited David tonight is a piece he has composed recently. It's called Before and After Nature, and it overlaps thematically with Haydn's Creation. And that's why we wanted him to talk about his view of Haydn's piece, and then what does it mean for a 21st century composer to write a piece about nature, about creation, how to deal with the different creation myths. So tonight, David will engage with Haydn's oratorio in preparation for the performance, but this will also serve as a little teaser for a performance of David's own work here in New Haven in the spring of 2027. So please welcome David Lang for his talk, My Debt on Haydn, or Creation Myths I Have Known and Loved. Please, David.
Thank you so much, Marcus, and hello everyone out there who I can't see, but I am happy to see you all, or happy to not see you all, actually. I'm very honored to be giving this lecture, the Tangeman Lecture, and in preparation for this, I watched several of the previous Tangeman lectures, which are online, and I encourage you all to do it. And I have to say that watching them terrified me a little because they're very good. They're really excellent. So I have some disclaimers that I want to start with before I go into my lecture. The first disclaimer is that those lectures seem to be given by very august scholars who actually know what they are talking about and have spent a life researching their subjects. And I have to say, I am not a scholar, right? I'm a composer. I'm not even a bad scholar. I'm just a composer. So my attitude towards these things, my attitude towards information may be very different from this perspective, but it's certainly not going to be scholarly. I have another disclaimer, which is that A lot of these lectures in this tradition are about a relationship of music to worship. And as you might imagine, because this is the Institute of Sacred Music, I have my Institute of Sacred Music mug here just to prove that I belong. Um, a lot of these things have to do with music's relationship to Christianity, and I am not Christian. So there are things about Christianity that I don't understand that may actually come up in this talk, and I just want to warn you that they might. The last thing is that, as Marcus explained, this is in connection with the performance that's upcoming of Haydn's The Creation. And uh, I'm not someone who has an encyclopedic knowledge of Haydn or his music. I could not whistle for you the 103rd Symphony Minuet. I could not do it. But I'm going to try. I'm going to do my best. Okay. So I'm going to start with something about Haydn that I think we all know, right? So start with a place that we know, right? This is Haydn's skull, right? So something we all know. When Haydn died, he was buried. Um, Immediately, someone who was interested in phrenology thought, here is a genius who has just died. We're going to dig this body up, cut off his head, and study it so we can see about the connection of the bumps on his skull with his genius. Okay, this is a very popular pseudoscience in the early 19th century, and so his head was cut off. Very quickly, the Esterházys, where Haydn had been employed for many years, for most of his career, decided that they wanted to dig this body up and bury him closer to home. When they dug the body up, they were shocked to discover that there was a body and no head. So they quickly found out who the phrenologist was. They quickly asked him to give the head back. He gave them someone else's head. And it took 150 years for Haydn's real head to be reunited with his body in this shrine, in this tomb, right? But the interesting question for the people then, after 150 years in exile, Haydn's skull is returned to this tomb. And what do you do with the other person's head, with the anonymous person's head that had been put in there? And the decision was made that Haydn's tomb should have one body and two heads. So there are two skulls and one skeleton there. In other words, there's one body and two heads. And I know it's really corny, but this is going to come up later in this talk. So please forgive me when it comes up, but it's coming back. Okay. Um, the reason that I have been asked to talk, as Marcus mentioned, is because I have a piece coming up called Before and After Nature. And Before and After Nature was something, it was a very interesting commission for me. It was a commission to work for Chorus and the Bang on a Can All-Stars, the house band of the Bang on a Can Festival. And the lead commissioner was Stanford University, where I did my undergraduate. And Stanford University had just started a new school of sustainability, and they wanted me to do something in conjunction with that school. So that school is dedicated to looking at strategies to deal with climate change and strategies of how to get the story of climate change in front of every department on campus and into as many disciplines as possible. So I went out to Stanford, I worked with students, I worked with scholars, I worked with people who were working in their nature preserve. And after a while of working there, what I decided was it's actually very difficult for us to talk about nature and climate change because we all have a different conception about what our relationship to nature is. And so I just started thinking, well, maybe that should become the subject of the piece, our inability to agree on our relationship with nature. And the problem is that we need to put ourselves into any story that we talk about in order to understand where we are. I thought if I had a piece that dealt with what life was like before we named nature nature, and after, so before we were here and after we are gone, I would be able then to just concentrate on what's essential in the world and what's essential in the universe without our intervention, without our observation, and without our destruction. And what I discovered was we have no way, or at least for me, for my understanding, there seems to be no way of understanding and describing nature without putting ourselves in the picture. That made me want to go to a source that I knew dealt with this issue successfully, and that was Haydn's The Creation. Okay, so this is the question I wanted to look at: is how do we contemplate the world before creation? And that led me to the very famous opening to Haydn's oratorio. So what my piece shares with Haydn is they're both trying to give us a picture of what the universe was like before creation. Haydn wants to show us the moment before the beginning of the phrase, in the beginning. So he needs to show us chaos. And how do you do that? What is chaos? And what is a way of depicting chaos so that we'll understand it as chaos? It's possible to imagine that there's noise or disorder. And in a way, if you think of John Cage, 4:33, 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence, that could be a kind of definition of chaos, right? Because it says we are surrounded all the time by other kinds of sounds. And what makes them acceptable in a piece of music is they are where they are right now, undifferentiated. And by listening to them, we can differentiate them. We organize it ourselves by hearing them. But that seems like it's the opposite definition of chaos. I think what Haydn needs to do is he wants to show us something so that we will feel the pull of its disorder. We will feel the chaos of its disorder. And Haydn's solution to this in The Creation, and if you listen to this performance coming up, I think you should pay attention to this, is how close the sounds Haydn uses in his creation to things that we already know are real music. So what happens in this piece is there's a giant unison note which is naked and without any clues to understand it. It'd be very easy to add a few notes to that to make us understand it, but we don't get those notes. There are dyads. There are two notes which sound interesting together, and they are looking for a third note to tell you what triad they belong to. But when that third note comes in, it is not the note that we expect. It's not the chord that is predicted. There are melodies in woodwinds that come in that are unsupported by a harmony underneath. In other words, we are led to understand chaos as being something that is almost order. The way we can contemplate disorder is by us understanding what order is first, so that that sense of order can be withdrawn from us and we can feel its absence. And that is how Haydn creates the sense of chaos. It's not real chaos. It's not just a bunch of noise. It's not just a bunch of things. It's the desire of Haydn's to make us feel the absence of the order that we need. And in a way, I think that this has a religious coefficient, because I think the point of chaos in a biblical sense is to make us feel that chaos is longing for order. It's making us long for God's intervention. And it's making us long for the time when things can be ordered enough so that we are here to appreciate order and appreciate the religion that creates the order. So I think that that's, sort of how the the shaping of the creation, the very famous opening of the creation works. So what I learned from this piece, for my own piece, is that it's very difficult to show what something is before we are there to name it or to understand it. And in order to understand this better, I went to 50 different creation myths from different cultures in the world and in history, and looked at how those creation myths explained the position of the universe before anything else was created. This is the text of the first movement of my piece. And you can see that these things that I have culled from other cultures are work by two different strategies of how to try to explain nothingness to us. It works by paradox, that there are things that can't possibly be true or we can't possibly understand. At the beginning, there's a description that says light its fragrance all spread out. Putting light and fragrance, these two different senses that fire us two different ways, is a contradiction that we can't understand. And in that contradiction is kind of a mystical misunderstanding or ununderstanding. And that's a way of projecting this idea of something. It's chaos is pre-understanding. Shapelessness, I'm not capable of understanding what shapelessness is in a cosmic sense. But most of the way that these creation myths work is by telling us things and then negating them. It's saying, you know what light is? There's no light. You know what pain is? There's no pain. You know what things that are formed are? Nothing is formed. So basically, the way these things work, because we are projected into the story of the things that we know, we can feel or we can potentially feel their absence when they are taken away. So now I'm going to play the first movement of this piece. This is the Bangetta Can All Stars. The choir is the Los Angeles Master Chorale. And there are projections in this, and the projections are by the English video artist Tal Rosner. And the idea of this is to begin. My idea of creation is not like the sense of Handel's creation. I wanted to begin with the simplest point and build things up. And so now I'm going to play this movement. So that's the first movement of this piece. There's 7 movements, and each one of these movements deals with a different way of our that nature thwarts our ability to understand it without putting ourselves in the picture. And I want to call out one particular moment for you, since this is the Institute of Sacred Music, is the number 3, What is a Mountain? So I am from California. Um, I in California, if you go to in the Bay Area, so the naturalist John Muir is a kind of legend. There's a John Muir Natural Forest. John Muir was the first white European to see Yosemite and to describe its mountains and forests. And his description of it is very famous. I remember reading it when I was in college and thinking it was incredibly beautiful. And what's interesting about it is he sees this beauty, which is so overwhelming for him. And the only language that he has in order to describe this beauty is language that he has learned from his Christian upbringing. So the existence of religion has given him a tool. It's given him the tool to be able to explain um, uh, this profound beauty that he sees around him. But again, this is like something we have learned this from some other place, and we take it to as a kind of screen between us and the thing that we are seeing. It's not really seeing the nature for itself. It's having the tool to describe it in this other already existing very human framework. And all the pieces, all the movements work this way. So this is coming up next year. I hope you all come. And it's conducted by Jeffrey Dauma. I think it's going to be really fun. Okay, next, Haydn's debt to Handel. It's absolutely clear that the creation would not have happened if Haydn had not, towards the end of his life, had the opportunity to go a few times to London. And I'm sure some of this you already know, so I'm going to speed through because I already see that I've already taken up a huge amount of time. Handel, of course, by this time, the Messiah is a legend. Haydn is brought to London to do some very lucrative conducting of his symphonies. He's brought there by the concert promoter Johann Salomon. Um, and he's there at exactly the right time to see the giant Handel Festival in London. He sees the Messiah and he's blown away. And I think he's blown away by a lot of things about it. And one is he's blown away by the communication, by the audience, by the money, because of course it's a commercial event. And I think he's also blown away by the fact that this is sort of an interesting definition for what an oratorio can be. You know, in Handel's definition, um, the oratorio is a serious religious subject. These religious oratorios are a serious religious subject transformed into a popular entertainment for a paying audience. There's, of course, lots of funny stories about Handel and money making. And one of them, which I really love, is that in the early days of the Messiah, if you bought a ticket, you were instructed that women folk coming to the concerts could not wear bustles because that would cut off one extra seat that they could sell on either side of the women. And so these really were, they were cultural events, they were musical, they were spectacular, but they were also money-making events. And I think that that's sort of important to remember, especially because Handel wrote this in 2 languages. He wrote it in German and he wrote it in English. And so partly we champion this as the first bilingual piece of music, but in fact, the bilingualness is also a marketing tool, right? It has 2 audiences. It has his own audience for the language he understands, because Haydn doesn't understand English very well at the beginning. And it's also for the London audience, because this is where this particular kind of oratorio and this particular kind of music making has been invented. Another part of the debt to Handel is that Solomon gives Haydn the libretto to the creation, the first draft of this, which was something that had been offered to Handel 50 years earlier and that Handel had declined to set. So Haydn takes this libretto, he goes back to Germany, he gives it to his collaborator, the Baron Gottfried von Swieten, and von Swieten turns it into German. Haydn sets it, and then von Swieten turns it back into English. And it turns it back into not very good English. So there's kind of like a tradition of making fun of the English of the Handel. I think you're going to be hearing it, this performance that's coming up at Yale, and in New York is going to be in German. But the English is a really interesting story because there could be no more English subject than this creation. It's a setting of texts from the King James Bible in English. And the text, the basic structure of the formula comes from Milton's Paradise Lost, which is hard enough to read for English speakers. I mean, I read it in college, and the way I read it in college was with the original, with Milton's original on the left-hand side of the page, and with the translation into modern English on the right, because there's no way I could understand it without. So imagine Haydn's struggle as a non-English speaker trying to do this. So I think people are used to the idea in classical music that we respect the origins of the musical forms that we inherit. So Haydn, a German speaker from Austria, writes his operas in Italian, and he writes his, later oratorios in English, and that's because opera is associated with an Italian tradition, and this oratorio owes its debt to the Handelian tradition. So I just want to say that some of the things that happen in this English translation are very funny. Like if you ever sing it, you have to sing, well, here's the way that Haydn is able to sound paint the existence of a flexible tiger. Here is how he sound paints the sheep as fleecy, meek, and bleating. So there's a way in which you can tell that English is not the first language of his collaborator. And it sort of reminds me of these Japanese t-shirts because t-shirts are American, we speak English, and so to have an authentic t-shirt in Japan means you need to have English on it. It doesn't really matter if the English makes sense. One of the famous parts of the English misspeaking is this very beautiful section, The Heavens Are Telling, which is one of the most famous parts of the creation. It's the end, the big baffo end of the first part of the whole piece. And it's a very, very beautiful and powerful, very Handelian kind of statement. But if you look at the text, it's clear that it's not a native English speaker. Today that is coming speaks it the day, the night that is gone, the following night. I think it is very charming. And actually, I've been commissioned to write a memorial piece for the Haydn scholar Don Moses, who's the conductor at the University of Iowa, where I did my master's degree. So I was commissioned to write a piece for his memory, and the name of my piece is Gone to Following Night. I'm not the only person who owes a debt to Handel. I mean, Haydn is not the only person who owes a debt to Handel. I don't have time to play music from this, so I'm going to speed through this section, but I just wrote my own oratorio for the New York Philharmonic. It just premiered 3 weeks ago. And this was something where I very self-consciously modeled an oratorio based on the Messiah. So I took the structure of the Messiah and I took the instrumentation from the Mozart arrangement of the Messiah. And I applied what I learned from the Messiah to the book, The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. This is the 250th anniversary of the writing of The Wealth of Nations, which is the foundational book for modern economics. And so I wrote this piece as a modern oratorio. And most of all, what I took from it was this Handelian definition that it is a serious subject told in front of a popular, as a popular entertainment in front of a paying audience, the New York Philharmonic. Here's a picture of what it looked like: chorus, mezzo, and solo, and bass baritone solos, and Gustavo Dudamel. And here's me pointing at Gustavo Dudamel, and Gustavo Dudamel pointing at me. And I could play it, but I have a section here that I'm going to speed through, so I'm not going to play it. Okay. So what is an oratorio anyway? That's a really good question. One of the things that's interesting, I mentioned before, that I'm not a Christian, right? In fact, I'm a moderately observant Jew. And one of the things that's very interesting, especially these Handelian oratorios and for the Haydn creation is that they begin with something from the Old Testament, and they mine that thing from the Old Testament for its predictive Christian power, right? So a lot of these things are about trying to find an origin story for a Christian story, and they look for that in something that in my religion is fine the way it is. And this is always something which is very odd when you are a Jew, right? You know, you are looking at all of these things, and if you look at this story, the creation story, right? It's telling you this incredible Christian thing that predicts the future through the life of Adam and Eve. If you look at Handel's Messiah, it's looking at the predictions in the book of Isaiah for things that predict the existence of Jesus, you know, generations into the future. And to us, we honor and revere the prophet Isaiah as an old man yelling at Jews who are bad Jews to be better Jews, right? You know, it doesn't need a second part, but somehow this becomes a large part of what Handel does, and it's also underlying the story of the creation. Um, I wanted to bring this up because I actually did write an oratorio at one point that tried to deal with this issue. So I wrote so Old Testament stories, right? So in these things are embedded these Old Testament stories, right? And if you think about it, maybe I'm going a little off topic here, but if you think about it, like the gospel according to Matthew begins with a genealogy that says Jesus goes all the way back to Abraham, right? If you think about it, the gospel according to John starts with its own creation story, right? It begins in the beginning, just like Genesis, right? In the beginning is the word. So if you're a Christian composer writing an oratorio about a creation, it could start there, right? But that's a different story, right? It seems like there's a lot of effort put into trying to show the connection between Old Testament stories and New Testament consequences. And to me, this is very interesting. And as I mentioned, I wrote a piece with my friends Michael Gordon and Julia Wolf called Lost Objects. So Michael Gordon and Julia Wolf are the two people that I started Bang on a Can with. They are both graduates of the Yale School of Music. And I would say that they are both more observant Jews than I am. We were commissioned in 2001 by the Great Baroque Orchestra Concerto Köln and by the choir in Berlin, the Ries Kammerchor, to write a piece for them to do together. And when we started looking at it, we thought, well, what's the point of a Baroque orchestra? A Baroque orchestra exists to keep alive something that otherwise would be lost. So it's working with this old technology and these old techniques, these old instruments. Nowhere else in our normal life would we so cherish trying to do something in its original fashion. You wouldn't go to a dentist and say, please take out my teeth with the original 18th century you know, dental tools you have. But somehow in music, this is a value for us. Music is a great place to have a message from the past that we don't want to lose. And so we thought, well, what is that message? And we started thinking about these Handelian oratorios. And we thought one of the things that's really interesting about those is that, in a way, by taking those Old Testament stories and using them for their power to lead to New Testament results, they're losing some of the things which are valuable from the Old Testament. And so we decided to make this piece about things that we have lost with a focus on those Old Testament things. We called our friend Deborah Artman to make a libretto for us. And we did this piece. I want to show you a few photographs of what we did. This is a photograph of our show from the Next Wave Festival at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. So you can see there's a band on top from Bang on a Can. There's the Baroque Orchestra in the middle, and there's the chorus at the bottom. But the nice thing about this platform is that people moved all over the place and changed all the time. And here is one example of one of these Jewish texts. This is a piece that Michael wrote to our holding onto a garment. So this is a section of the Talmud. You know, the Talmud is the commentary on the Torah, on the Old Testament. So, and this is a commentary, which is trying to decide what the law should be that governs when two people claim the same piece of property. And so this is a piece that Michael wrote. This is a piece that I wrote, which is something from the Torah about remembering how to make the proper sacrifices in the temple in Jerusalem. You know, we don't have our temple any longer. And we have our own idea of when the Messiah comes, and when our Messiah comes, that what we say is that we will be able to worship in our temple in Jerusalem again. And the odd thing about that, which is really perplexing to me, and I find very, kind of head scratching and also kind of, incredible, is that when we have our own temple again, we will have to go back to sacrificing animals with exactly the same rules that are prescribed in the Bible. And so part of Jewish liturgy during the year is to remember the proper order and the proper animals and the proper sacrifices that we need to do when the Messiah returns. Until the Messiah returns, these are lost technologies. So they belong in this piece. Oh, also, we had a DJ. This is DJ Spooky, and this is a scroll that went over him of extinct species, of lost species. So I'm going to play for you a movement that I wrote for two countertenors. And this is a movement which is based on this phrase from Exodus and from its Talmudic commentary. So when you encounter your enemy's ox or donkey wandering, you must take it back. And then there's a whole commentary in the Talmud about how to derive the laws which govern all the different possibilities that might happen when your enemy's ox comes into your possession. So what I love about that is just the beauty of the Talmudic problem. There's this one line in the text that says this thing that opens up the store. Well, you have an enemy and he has an ox, and it comes onto your property. What do you do? And then the Talmud has to generate this whole series of laws about our obligations to each other. That it's obvious to us, of course, that the people we love, we want to be nice to them, we want to support them, we want to help them, but you need a set of laws that tells you that you have obligations to the people you don't like, that the people you don't know, and the people who aren't part of your group. I think it's very powerful. So this piece, Lost Objects, it also has sections on lost language and lost capabilities and lost explorers. And it begins with something I wrote that just begins, I lost a sock. I lost my umbrella. It's just a list of things that you lose. But again, the major point of this, the real kind of foundational point to this that we started with was the idea of trying to return the lost Jewish content to this format of the Handelian oratorio. And we are now at the end of my lecture. And I'm going to say this incredibly corny thing, which I apologize for in advance, which is it seems like the problem that we were dealing with in Lost Objects and the thing that I've been talking about for the end of this lecture is that we have this sense that these religions are together and that this musical form, this oratorio is together. But it actually has these two different sources that it draws on. It is one musical form that draws from the Old Testament and from the New Testament. And it's almost like saying that there's one body and two heads. I told you it was coming back. Okay, I'm really sorry. And that concludes my talk.
Thank you, David, so much. If we could hear each other, you would hear applause right now. You said at the beginning of your talk that you are not a scholar. But if the task of a scholar is to illuminate things, then you have done exactly what we expect from a scholar. You have illuminated not only Haydn's oratorio, but even more how we can listen to a piece that was composed in the late 18th century, how we can make sense of it in our own time, and how our own time has to rethink some of the problems that Haydn is struggling with in his oratorio. So thank you so much. I think you've given us a lot, and thank you for the teaser for your own performance next year. I hope that yeah, a lot of you in the audience will have an opportunity to listen to that piece as well. So that's left for me to say is thank you, David, for this wonderful talk. And all of you, thank you for being with us, spending your evening with us. And I hope that we will see a lot of you at one of the performances, either in New York on May 1st or in New Haven on May 2nd. Thank you. Good
Thank you
night.
so much. Thank you, everyone.